and welcome to another chapter of reading. So let's get started, shall we? Chapter 5, Fallen Warrior. Hagrid? Harry struggled to raise himself out of the debris of metal and leather that surrounded him. His hands sank into inches of muddy water as he tried to stand. Not mud again. He could not understand where Voldemort had gone and expected him to swoop out of the darkness at any moment. Something hot and wet was trickling down his chin and from his forehead. He crawled out of the pond and stumbled toward the great dark mass on the ground that was Hagrid. Hagrid, talk to me! But the dark mass did not stir. Okay, these characters were cut from the films, so I am using how I envision their voices. I hope you enjoy them. Who's that? Is it Potter? Are you Harry Potter? Harry did not recognize the man's voice. Then a woman shouted, "They've crashed, Ted! Crashed in the garden!" Harry's head was swimming. "Hagrid," he repeated stupidly, and his knees buckled. The next thing he knew, he was lying on his back atop what felt like cushions, with a burning sensation in his ribs and right arm. His missing tooth had been regrown. The scar on his forehead was still throbbing. Hagrid? He opened his eyes and saw that he was lying on a sofa in an unfamiliar lamplit sitting room. His rucksack lay on the floor a short distance away, wet and muddy. A fair-haired, big-bellied man was watching Harry anxiously. "Hagrid's fine, son," said the man. "The wife's seeing to him now. How are you feeling? Anything else broken? I fixed your ribs, tooth, and arm. I'm Ted, by the way. Ted Tonks, Dora's father." Harry sat up too quickly. Lights popped in front of his eyes, and he felt sick and giddy. "Yeah, probably should not have done that, Harry." "Voldemort, easy now," said Ted Tonks, placing a hand on Harry's shoulder. It's not specified which shoulder, so there. And pushing him back against the cushions. That was a nasty crash you just had. What happened anyway? Something go wrong with the bike? Arthur Weasley overstretched himself again? Hit with his muffled contraptions? "No," said Harry, and his scar pulsed like an opened wound. "Death Eaters. Note of them. For Chase." "Death Eaters?" said Ted sharply. "What do you mean, Death Eaters? I thought they didn't know you were being moved tonight. I thought they knew," said Harry. Ted Tonks looked up at the ceiling as though he could see through it to the sky above. "Well, we know our protective charms hold them, don't we? We shouldn't be able to get within 100 yards of the place in any direction. Now Harry understood why Voldemort had vanished. It had been at the point where the motorbike crossed the barrier of the Order's charms. He only hoped they would continue to work. He imagined Voldemort, 100 yards above them as they spoke, looking for a way to penetrate what Harry visualized as a great transparent bubble. Yeah, I guess that's one way to describe it. However, I would have gone with snow globe. He swung his legs off the sofa. He needed to see Hagrid with his own eyes before he could believe that he was alive. He had barely stood up, however, when a door opened and Hagrid squeezed through it, his face covered in mud and blood, limping a little, but miraculously alive. Why does mud have to keep returning? Harry! Knocking over two delicate tables and as uh, a bidistra? Okay, what is this? Okay. Knocking over two delicate tables and a cast iron plant, he covered the floor between them in two strides and pulled Harry into a hug. That nearly cracked his newly repaired ribs. Blimey, how did you get out of that? I thought we were both goners. Yeah, me too. I can't believe Harry broke off. He had just noticed the woman who had entered the room behind Hagrid. Yo! He shouted, and he thrust his hands into his pocket, but it was empty. "One's here, son," said Ted, tapping it on Harry's arm. "It come up beside you. I picked it up. And that's my boy you're shouting at." "Oh, I'm, I'm sorry." As she moved forward into the room, Mrs. Tonk's resentment to her sister Bellatrix became much less pronounced. Her hair was a light, soft brown, and her eyes were wider and kinder. Nevertheless, she looked a little haughty after Harry's exclamation. "What happened to our daughter?" she asked. "Hagrid said you were ambushed. Where's Fedora?" "I don't know," said Harry. "I don't know what happened to anyone else." She and Ted exchanged looks. A mixture of fear and guilt gripped Harry at the sight of their expressions. if any of the others had died. Foreshadowing. It was his fault, all his fault. He had consented to the plan, given them his hair. Hugs for Harry. Your feelings are totally valid, but your blame is misplaced. Everyone understood what they were going through to have this plan. You should not shoulder this alone. The boat key, he said, remembering all of a sudden. We've got to get back to the Burrow and find out. Then we'll be able to send you word or Tonks will when she's... Oh, wrong place, I guess. The port key, he said, remembering all of a sudden. We've got to get back to the Burrow and find out. Then we'll be able to send you word or Tonks will when she's... It'll be okay, Dromeda, said Ted. She knows to stop. She's been in plenty of tight spots with the oars. The port key's right here, he added to Harry. It's supposed to leave in 3 minutes, if you want to take it. Yeah, me too, said Harry. He seized his rucksack, swung it onto his shoulders. He looked at Mrs. Tonks, wanting to apologize for the state of fear in which he left her and for which he felt so terribly responsible. But no words occurred to him that didn't seem hollow and insincere. I'll tell Tonks, Dora, to send word when she... Thanks for patching us up. Thanks for everything. He was glad to leave the room and follow Ted Tonks along the short hallway and into a bedroom. Hagrid came after them, bending low to avoid hitting his head on the door lintel. There you go, son. That's the port key. Mr. Tonks was pointing to a small silver-backed hairbrush lying on the dressing table. Kind of wonder if it belongs to Andromeda or Nymphadora. I know, she doesn't like being called Nymphadora, but I needed to distinguish her from her mum. But either way, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Thanks, said Harry, reaching out to place a finger on it, ready to leave. Wait a moment, said Hagrid, looking round. Harry, where's Hedwig? She got hit. Hugs for Harry. The realization crashed over him. He felt ashamed of himself as the tears stung his eyes. The elf had been his companion, his one great link with the magical world whenever he had been forced to return to the Dursleys. Hagrid reached out a great hand and patted him painfully on the shoulder. Never mind, he said gruffly. Never mind. She had a great old life. Hagrid, said Ted Tonks warningly, as the hairbrush glowed bright blue. I hope not too bright. And Hagrid only just got his forefinger to it in time. But the jerk behind the navel as though an invisible hook and line had dragged him forward. Harry was pulled into nothingness, spinning uncontrollably, his finger glued to the port key as he and Hagrid hurtled away from Mr. Tonks. Seconds later, Harry's feet swam onto hard ground, and he fell onto his hands and knees in the yard of the Burrow. He heard screams, which I will not attempt. Throwing aside the no longer glowing hairbrush, Harry stood up, swaying slightly, and saw Mrs. Weasley and Ginny running down the steps by the back door as Hagrid, who had also collapsed on landing, clambered laboriously to his feet. Harry! You are the Harry! What happened? Where are the others? Cried Mrs. Weasley. What do you mean? Isn't anyone else back? Harry panted. The answer was clearly etched in Mrs. Weasley's pale face. The Death Eaters were waiting for us, Harry told her. We were surrounded the moment took off. They knew it was tonight. I don't know what happened to anyone else. Four of them chased us. It was all we could do to get away. And then Voldemort caught up with us. He could hear the self-justifying note in his voice. The plea for her to understand why he didn't know what happened to her sons. But thank goodness you're all right, she said, pulling him into a hug he did not feel he deserved. Oh, Harry, you deserve all the hugs in the world. And here's another one for me while I'm at it. I'm glad to have you, Molly, asked Hagrid a little shakily, for medicinal purposes. I can confirm, based on research, that actually is a use for certain alcohol. So, I guess it could work, but I would recommend, especially if you're in America, to use it in moderation, and provided you're over 21, of course. I don't think anyone wants to experience what intoxication is like while you're sick. That would probably make you sicker. But still, over 21 and in moderation. But if you're in the UK, I can confirm based on research that it is seen as that. So anyway, she could have summoned it by magic, But as she hurried back toward the crooked house, Harry knew that she wanted to hide her face. He turned to Ginny, and she answered his unspoken plea for information at once. Ron and Tonks should have been back first, but they missed their pole key and came back without them, she said, pointing at a rusty oil can lying on the ground nearby. And that one, she pointed at an ancient trainer, sneaker in this case, should have been Dad and Fred's. They were supposed to be second. You and Hagrid were third, and she checked her watch. Now I'm curious as to what design her watch has. Is it something sporty to fit her athletic personality? Is it something a little more elegant to show a little bit of femininity? Let me know in the comments. I'm very curious. If they make it, George and Lupin ought to be back in about a minute. Mrs. Weasley reappeared carrying a bottle of brandy, which she handed to Hagrid. He uncorked it and drank it straight down in one. Wow, Hagrid. You are definitely built differently. Mum! Shouted Ginny, pointing to a spot several feet away. A blue light had appeared in the darkness. It grew larger and brighter. Then Lupin and George appeared, spinning, then falling. Harry knew immediately that there was something wrong. Lupin was supporting George, who was unconscious and whose face was covered in blood. Harry ran forward and seized George's legs. Together he and Lupin carried George into the house and through the kitchen to the sitting room, where they laid him on the sofa. As the lamplight fell across George's head, Ginny gasped and Harry's stomach lurched. One of George's ears was missing. The side of his head and neck were drenched in wet, shockingly scarlet blood. No sooner had Mrs. Weasley bent over her son than Lupin grabbed Harry by the upper arm and dragged him, none too gently, back to the kitchen, where Hagrid was still attempting to ease his bulk through the back door. "Oi!" said Hagrid indignantly. "Let go of him! Let go of Harry!" Lupin ignored him. "What creature sat in the corner the first time that Harry Potter visited my office at Hogwarts?" he said, giving Harry a small shake. "Answer me!" And I love Lupin's logic for this. I really do. A Grindy that went in a tank, wasn't it? Lupin released Harry and fell back against the kitchen cupboard. "What's that about?" roared Hagrid. "I'm sorry, Harry, but I had to check," said Lupin tersely. "You've been betrayed. Voldemort knew that you were being moved tonight, and the only people who could have told him were directly involved in the plan. You might have been an imposter. So why don't you check him me?" panted Hagrid, still struggling to fit through the door. "You're half giant," said Lupin, looking up at Hagrid. "The Polyjuice potion is designed for human use only." "None of the Order would have told Voldemort we were moving tonight," said Harry. "The idea was dreadful to him. He couldn't believe it of any of them. Voldemort only caught up with me toward the end. he didn't know which one I was in the beginning. If he'd been in on the plan, he'd have known from the start I was the one with Hagrid. What caught up with you? Said Lupin sharply. What happened? How did you escape? Harry explained briefly how the Death Eaters pursuing them had seemed to recognize him as the true Harry, how they had abandoned the chase, how they must have summoned Voldemort, but had just appeared before he and Hagrid had reached the sanctuary of Tonks's parents. They recognized you? But how? What had you done? Harry tried to remember. The whole journey seemed like a blur of panic and confusion. I saw Stanton Pike. No, the bloke was the conductor on the web bus, and I tried to disarm him instead of, well, he doesn't know what he's doing, does he? He must be imperious. I personally prefer imperioized, but, whatever word produces the magic out of your wand there. Lupin looked aghast. Harry, the time for disarming is past. These people aren't trying to capture and kill you. At least don't if you aren't prepared to kill. You were 100 feet up! Stan's not himself, and if I stunned him and he'd fallen, he'd have died the same as if I used Abracadabra. Expelliarmus saved me from Voldemort 2 years ago. Harry added defiantly. Lupin was reminding him of the sneering Hufflepuff Zachariah Smith. Again, no relation, though a lot of my family members are Hufflepuffs. And I'm also wondering if Zacharias isn't somehow distantly related to Hepzibah. I would think it's possible, don't you think? Who had jeered at Harry for wanting to teach Dumbledore's army how to disarm. Yes, Harry, said Lupin with painful restraint. And a great number of Death Eaters witnessed that happening. Forgive me, but it was a very unusual move then, under the imminent threat of death. Repeating it tonight in front of Death Eaters who either witnessed or heard about the first occasion was close to self-harm. Which is my polite way of putting it. I do not wish anyone to conduct this type of behavior on themselves. And if you are considering it, please, please, please seek professional help. You are important to this world, whether you realize it or not. And therefore your life is so precious. What you do not only hurts you, but those around you. So if you are having these thoughts, please, please, please seek professional help. I cannot address it enough. So you think I should have killed Stan Pike? Said Harry angrily. Of course not, said Lupin. But the Death Eaters, frankly most people, would have expected you to attack back. Expelliarmus is a useful spell, Harry, but the Death Eaters seem to think it's your signature move, and I urge you not to let it become so. It's late for that, don't you think? Lupin was making Harry feel idiotic, and yet there was still a grain of defiance inside him. I won't blast people out of my way just because they're there, said Harry. That's Voldemort's job. Lupin's retort was lost. Finally succeeding in squeezing through the door, Hagrid staggered to a chair and sat down. It collapsed beneath him. Ignoring his mingled oaths and apologies, Harry addressed Lupin again. Will George be okay? All of Lupin's frustration with Harry seemed to drain away at that question. I think so. Although there's no chance of replacing his hair. Not when it's been cursed off. There was a scuffling from outside. Lupin dived for the back door. Harry leapt over Hagrid's legs and sprinted into the yard. Two figures had appeared in the yard, and as Harry ran toward them, he realized they were Hermione, now returning to her normal appearance, and Kingsley, both clutching a bent coat hanger. Hermione flung herself into Harry's arms, but Kingsley showed no pleasure at the sight of any of them. Over Hermione's shoulder, Harry saw him raise his wand and pointed at Lupin's chest. The last words Albus Dumbledore spoke to the pair of us. Harry is the best hope we have. Trust him, said Lupin calmly. Kingsley turned his wand on Harry, but Lupin said, It's him. I've checked. All right, said Kingsley, stowing his wand back beneath his cloak. But somebody betrayed us. They knew it was tonight. So it seems, replied Lupin. But apparently they did not realize that there would be 7 Harrys. Small comfort, snarled Kingsley. Who else is back? Only Harry, Hagrid, George, and I. Hermione stifled a little moan behind her head. What happened to you? Lupin asked Kingsley. Followed by 5, injured 2, might have killed 1. Kingsley reeled off. And we saw you know who as well. He joined the chase halfway through, but vanished pretty quickly. And as he can't fly, supplied Harry. I saw him too. He came after Hagrid and I. So that's why he left. To follow you. Said Kingsley. I couldn't understand why he vanished. But what made him change targets? Harry behaved not too kindly to Stan Shunpike, said Lupin. Stan? Repeated Hermione. But I thought it was in Azkaban. Kingsley let out a mirthless laugh. Hermione, there's obviously been a mass breakout, which the Ministry has hushed up. Travers Hood fell off when I cursed him. He's supposed to be inside too. But what happened to you, Remus? Where's George? He lost an ear, said Lupin. Lost an... repeated Hermione in a high voice. Snape's work, said Lupin. Snipe! Shouted Harry. You didn't say! He lost his hood during the chase. Sectum temper was always a specialty of Snape's. I wish I could say I paid him back in kind, but it was all I could do to keep George on the broom after he was injured. He was losing so much blood. Silence fell between the four of them as they looked up at the sky. There was no sign of movement. The stars stared back, unblinking, indifferent, unobscured by flying friends. Where was Ron? Where were Fred and Mr. Weasley? Where were Bill, Fur, Tonks, Mad-Eye, and Mundungus? Harry, give us a hand, called Hagrid hoarsely from the door, in which he was stuck again. Glad to have something to do, Harry pulled him free, then headed through the empty kitchen and back into the sitting room, where Mrs. Weasley and Ginny were still tending to George. Mrs. Weasley had staunched his bleeding now, and by the windpipe Harry saw a clean gaping hole where George's ear had been. How is he? Mrs. Weasley looked around and said, I can't make it go back, but when it's been removed by dark magic. But it could have been so much worse. He's alive. Yeah, said Harry. Thank God. Did I hear someone else in the yard? Ginny asked. Hermione and Kingsley, said Harry. Thank goodness, Ginny whispered. They looked at each other. Harry wanted to hug her, hold on to her. He did not even care much that Mrs. Weasley was there. But before he could act on the impulse, there was a great crash from the kitchen. A proof who I am, Kingsley, after I've seen my son. Now back off if you know what's good for you. Harry had never heard Mr. Weasley shout like that before. He burst into the living room, his bald patch gleaming with sweat, his spectacles askew, Fred right beside him, both pale but uninjured. Arthur! Sobbed Mrs. Weasley. Oh, thank goodness! How is he? Mr. Weasley dropped to his knees beside George. For the first time since Harry had known him, Fred seemed to be lost for words. He gaped over at the back of the sofa at his twin's wound as he could not believe what he was seeing. Perhaps roused by the sound of Fred and their father's arrival, George stirred. How do you feel, Georgie? Whispered Mrs. Weasley. George's fingers groped for the side of his head. Same like, he murmured. What's wrong with him? Probed Fred, looking terrified. Is his mind affected? Same like, repeated George, opening his eyes and looking up at his brother. See, I'm holy. Holy. Fred, get it? Mrs. Weasley sobbed harder than ever. Color flooded Fred's pale face. Pathetic, he told George. Pathetic. Of all the whole wide world of irritated humor, before you go for holy. I combined the book and film for this. I found it more fitting. Well, said George, grinning at his tear-soaked mother. You'll be able to tell us apart now anyway, Mum. Well, while not to that extreme, I do have a way to tell my ginger-haired twin goddaughters. Grace wears glasses and Keely doesn't. Let's see. Do I have a picture of that? I will show you a picture of that. Bingo. So, this is Grace. And that's Kaylee. So again, while not to the extreme of losing an ear, thankfully, the fact that Grace wears glasses like me and Kaylee doesn't is a nice way to tell them apart. But moving on. He looked around. Hi, Harry. You are Harry, right? Yeah, I am, said Harry, moving closer to the sofa. Well, at least we got you back okay, said George. I don't want him to hunt around my sick bed. I'm not back yet, George, said Mrs. Weasley. George's grin faded. Harry glanced at Ginny and motioned her to accompany him back outside. As they walked through the kitchen, he said in a low voice, Ron and Tom should be back by now. They didn't have a long journey. Auntie Mary was not that far from here. Where, what house does Auntie Maria live in? Now I'm curious. Harry said nothing. He had been trying to keep fear at bay ever since reaching the burrow, but now it enveloped him, seeming to crawl over his skin, throbbing in his chest, clogging his throat. As they walked down the back steps into the dark yard, Ginny took his hand. Kingsley was striding backward and forward, glancing up at the sky every time he turned. Harry was reminded of Uncle Vernon pacing in the living room a million years ago. Well, I don't think it was a million years ago, Harry, but the hyperbole is well appreciated. Hagrid, Hermione, and Lupin stood shoulder to shoulder, gazing upward in silence. None of them looked around when Harry and Ginny joined their silent vigil. The minutes stretched into what might have as well been years. The slightest breath of wind made them all jump and turn toward the whispering bush or tree in the hope that one of the missing order members might leap unscathed from its leaves. And then a bird materialized directly above them and streaked toward the ground. It's them! Screamed Hermione. Tonks landed in a long skid that sent earth and pebbles everywhere. Remus! Tonks cried as she staggered off the broom into Lupin's arms. His face was set and white. He seemed unable to speak. Ron tripped dazedly toward Harry and Hermione. Okay, he mumbled before Hermione flew at him and hugged him tightly. Aw, she does care. I thought, oh, wrong voice. I thought, all right, said Ron, patting her on the back. I know it's more shoulder, but bear with me. I'm fine. Ron was great, said Tonks warmly, relinquishing her hold on Lupin. Wonderful. Send one of the Death Eaters straight to the head, and when you're aiming at a moving target from the flying broom. Oh, from the flying broom? Yeah, I'm gonna read that. It's just, I guess, and it'll mix up with voices. You do this for so long, it's hard to keep track sometimes. Mom was great, said Tonks warmly, relinquishing her hold on Lupin. Wonderful. Send one of the Death Eaters. Straight to the head. And when you're aiming at moving target from a flying broom. That's better. You did, said Hermione, gazing up at Ron with her arms still around his neck. Always the sort of surprise, he said a little grumpily, breaking free. Are we the last pack? No, said Ginny. We're still waiting for Bill and Fleur. We're still waiting for Bill, Fleur, Mad-Eye, and Matungus. I'm going to tell Mom and Dad you're okay, Ron. She ran back inside. So what kept you? What happened? Lupin sounded almost angry at Tonks. Bellatrix, said Tonks. She wants me quite as much as she wants Harry Remus. She tried very hard to kill me. I just wish I'd got her. I owe Bellatrix. But we definitely entered Rodolphus. Then we got to Ron's Aunt Mariella's, and we'd missed our portkey, and she was fussing over us. Ah, yes, older relatives do tend to do that to younger generations. A muscle was jumping in Lupin's jaw. He nodded, but seemed unable to say anything else. So what happened to you lot? Tonks asked, turning to Harry, Hermione, and Kingsley. They recounted the stories of their own journeys, but all the time the continued absence of Bill, Fleur, Mad-Eye, and Matungus seemed to lie upon them like a frost, its icy bite harder and harder to ignore. I'm gonna have to get back to Downing Street. I should have been there an hour ago, Kingsley said, finally, after a last sweeping gaze at the sky. Let me know when they're back. Lupin nodded. With a wave to the others, Kingsley walked away into the darkness toward the gate. Harry thought he heard the faintest pop as Kingsley disapparated just beyond the Burrow's boundaries. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley came racing down the back steps, Ginny behind them. Both parents hugged Ron before turning to Lupin and Tonks. Thank you, said Mrs. Weasley, for our sons. Don't be silly, Mommy, said Tonks at once. How's George? Asked Lupin. What's wrong with him? Piped up Ron. He's lost. But by the end of Mrs. Weasley's sentence was drowned in a general outcry. A thrush had just soared into sight and landed a few feet from them. Bill and Fleur slid from its back, windswept, but unhurt. Bill! Thank God, thank God! Mrs. Weasley ran forward, but the hug Bill bestowed upon her was perfunctory. Looking directly at his father, he said, Mad-Eye's dead. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Harry felt as though something inside him was falling through the earth, leaving him forever. We saw it, said Bill. Fleur nodded, tear tracks glittering on her cheeks in the light from the kitchen window. It happened just after we broke out of the circle. Mad Eye and Dun were close by us. They were heading north too. Formal, he can fly. Went straight for them. Dun panicked. I heard him cry out. Mad Eye tried to stop him, but he just separated. Voldemort's curse hit Mad Eye full in the face. He fell backward off his broom, and there was nothing we could do. Nothing. We had half a dozen of them on our own tail. Bill's voice broke. Of course you couldn't have done anything, said Lupin. They all stood looking at each other. Harry could not quite comprehend it. Mad Eye dead? It couldn't be. Mad Eye, so tough, brave, the consummate survivor. At last it seemed to dawn on everyone, though nobody said it, that there was no point in waiting in the yard anymore. And in silence they followed Mr. and Mrs. Weasley back into the burrow, and into the living room where Fred and George were laughing together. "What's wrong?" said Fred, scanning their faces as they entered. "What's happened? Who's—" "Mad Eye," said Mr. Weasley. "Dead." The twins' grins turned into grimaces of shock. Nobody seemed to know what to do. Tonks was crying silently into a handkerchief. She had been close to Mad Eye, Harry knew. His favorite and his protege at the Ministry of Magic. Hagrid, who had sat down on the floor in the corner where he had the most space, was dabbing at his eyes with his tablecloth-sized handkerchief. Bill walked over to the sideboard and pulled out a bottle of fire whiskey and some glasses. "Here," he said, and with a wave of his wand he sent 12 full glasses soaring through the room to each of them, holding the 13th aloft. "Mad Eye! Mad Eye!" they all said and drank. "Mad Eye!" echoed Hagrid, a little late with a hiccup. Okay, I don't know how accurate this will be, considering I don't have the hiccups right now, but here's a good interpretation, I guess. The fire whiskey seared Harry's throat. It seemed to burn feeling back into him, dispelling the numbness and sense of unreality, firing him with something that was like courage. "So Mundungus disappeared," said Lupin, who had drained his own glass in one. The atmosphere changed at once. Everybody looked tense, watching Lupin, both wanting him to go on. It seemed to Harry, and slightly afraid of what they might hear. "I know what you're thinking," said Bill, "and I wondered that too, on the way back here. Because they seemed to be expecting us, didn't they? But Mundungus can't have betrayed us. They didn't know there would be 7 Harrys. I confused them the moment we appeared. And in case you've forgotten, it was Mundungus who suggested that little bit of skullduggery. Why couldn't he have told them the essential point? I think Dun panicked. It's as simple as that. He didn't want to come in the first place, but Mad Eye made him. And you know who went straight for them. It was enough to make anyone panic." "You know who did exactly as Mad Eye expected him to," sniffed Tonks. "Mad Eye said he'd expected Red Harry to be with the toughest, most skilled oars. He chased Mad Eye first, and when Mudungus gave them away, he switched to Kingsley. It's all very good, snapped Burrow. But it still does not explain how they knew we were moving every tonight, does it? Somebody must have been careless. Somebody that zipped the date to an outsider. It is the only explanation for knowing the date, but not knowing the old plan. Again, I really hope I do for her justice. She is one of my favorite characters. She glared around at them all, tracks still etched on her beautiful face, silently daring any of them to contradict her. Nobody did. The only sound to break the silence was that of Hagrid hiccuping from behind his handkerchief. Harry glanced at Hagrid, whom just risked his own life to save Harry's. Hagrid, whom he loved, whom he trusted, who had once been tricked into giving Voldemort crucial information in exchange for a dragon's egg. No, said Harry aloud, and they all looked at him surprised. The fire of whiskey seemed to have amplified his voice. I mean, if somebody made a mistake, Harry went on, and let something slip, I know they didn't mean to do it. It's not their fault. He repeated again, a little louder than he would have usually have spoken. We've got to trust each other. I trust all of you. I don't think anyone in this room would ever sell me to Voldemort. More silence followed his words. They were all looking at him. Harry felt a little hot again, and drank some more fire whiskey for something to do. As he drank, he thought of Mad-Eye. Mad-Eye had always been scathing about Dumbledore's willingness to trust people. Constant vigilance! Sorry, I just had to weave this in somewhere. Well said, Harry, said Fred unexpectedly. Yeah, ear, said George with half a glance at Fred, the corner of whose mouth twitched. Lupin was wearing an odd expression as he looked at Harry. It was close to pitying. You think I'm a fool? Demanded Harry. No, I think you're like James, said Lupin, who would have regarded it as the height of dishonor to mistrust his friends. I would consider it a dishonor too, with how many friends I have. It may not be a large crowd, but the ones that I do have in my circle are very beloved to me. So betraying them is just inconceivable to me. Harry knew what Lupin was getting at, that his father had been betrayed by his friend Peter Pettigrew. He felt irrationally angry. He wanted to argue, but Lupin had turned away from him, set down his glass upon a side table, and addressed Bill. There's work to do. I can ask Kingsley whether... No, said Bill at once. I'll do it. I'll come. Where are you going? Said Tonks and Ford together. Mad-Eye's body, said Lupin. We need to recover it. Can't it? Began Mrs. Weasley with an appealing look at Bill. Wait, said Bill. Not unless you'd rather the Death Eaters took it. Nobody spoke. Lupin and Bill said goodbye and left. The rest of them now dropped into chairs, all except for Harry, who remained standing. The suddenness and completeness of death was with them like a presence. I've got to go too, said Harry. 10 pairs of startled eyes looked at him. Don't be silly, Harry, said Mrs. Weasley. What are you talking about? can't stay here. He rubbed his forehead. It was going again. It had not hurt like this for more than a year. You're all in danger while I'm here. I don't want. Don't be so silly, cried Mrs. Weasley. The whole point of tonight was to get you here safely, and thank goodness it worked. If Darcy agreed to get married here rather than in France, we've arranged everything so that we can all stay together and look after you. Oh, I would have loved to have known what the wedding would have been like in France. That would be so romantic. But of course, desperate times call for desperate measures, so I can see her willing to compromise for this sake. However, this now prompts the headcanon that they went for honeymoon to France. Once everything was settled down, of course. Moving on. She didn't understand. She was making him feel worse, not better. If Voldemort finds out I'm here. But why should he? Asked Mrs. Weasley. There are a dozen places you might be now, Harry, said Mr. Weasley. He's got no way of knowing which safe house you're in. It's not me I'm worried for, said Harry. We know that, said Mr. Weasley quietly. But it would make our efforts tonight seem rather pointless if you left. We're not going anywhere, growled Hagrid. Blimey, Harry, after all we went through to get you here. Yeah, what about my bleeding ear? Said George, hoisting himself up on his cushions. I know that. But I don't really know what voice goes with what, so I'm going to go with the first one being being I really don't know who says what, so I'm just gonna do it in whatever voice I feel like. I'm sorry, but it makes it hard for me to determine what voice to use because they don't explicitly mention it. However, if I had to guess, it goes Harry, George, then go back to Harry. So I'm gonna go with that, but it just bugs me when there's no explicit mention of the voice. Because then I have to be like, what goes with what? But anyway, I know that. But I wouldn't want. I know! Harry bellowed. He felt beleaguered and blackmailed. Did they think he didn't know what they had done for him? Didn't they understand that it was for precisely that reason that he wanted to go now, before they had to suffer any more on his behalf? There was a lone and awkward silence in which his scar continued to prickle and throb, and which was broken at last by Mrs. Weasley. Where's Hedwig, Harry? She said coaxingly. We can put her up with Pigwidgeon and give her something to eat. Poor Harry. Here's another hug. His insides clenched like a fist. He couldn't tell her the truth. He drank the last of his fire whiskey to avoid answering him. Wait till you tell you did it again, Harry. said Hagrid. Escaped him, fought him off, and he was right on top of you. It wasn't me, said Harry flatly. It was my wand. My wand acted of its own accord. After a few moments, Hermione said gently, But that's impossible, Harry. You mean that you did magic without meaning to? You reacted instinctively. No, said Harry. The bike was falling. I couldn't have told you where Voldemort was, but my wand spun in my hand and found him. Then it shot a spell at him, and it wasn't even a spell I recognized. I've never made gold flames appear before. Often, said Mr. Weasley, when you're in a pressured situation, you can produce magic you've never dreamed of. Small children often find before they're trained. It wasn't like that, said Harry through gritted teeth. His scar was burning. He felt angry and frustrated. He hated the idea that they were all imagining him to have power to match Voldemort's. No one said anything. He knew that they did not believe him. Hugs for Harry. I believe you. Now that he came to think of it, he never heard of a wand performing magic on its own before. His scar seared with pain. It was all he could do not to moan aloud. Muttering about fresh air, he set down his glass and left the room. As he crossed the dark yard, the great skeletal Destro looked up, rustled its enormous bat-like wings, then resumed its grazing. Harry stopped at the gate into the garden, staring out at its overgrown plants, rubbing his pounding forehead, and thinking of Dumbledore. Dumbledore would have believed him. He knew it. Dumbledore would have known how and why Harry's wand had acted independently, because Dumbledore always had the answers. He had known about wands, had explained to Harry the strange connection that existed between his wand and Voldemort's. But Dumbledore, like Mad-Eye, Sirius, his parents, his poor owl, were all gone where Harry could never talk to them again. He felt a burning in his throat that had nothing to do with the fire whiskey. Aww, hugs for Harry. And then, out of nowhere, the pain in his scar peaked. As he clutched his forehead and closed his eyes, a voice screamed inside his head. You told me the problem would be solved by using another's wand. And into his mind burst the vision of an emaciated old man lying in rags upon a stone floor, screaming a horrible, drawn-out scream. I will not attempt. A scream of unendurable agony, again, which I will not attempt. No, no. I beg you. Lie to Lord Voldemort, Ollivander. And because I don't know, this is another instance where the dialogue is very unclear, although in this case I understand why it's unclear. It's just, it still kind of irks me. I'm having it be Ollivander, Voldemort, get the rest of the chain. Moving on. I did not. I swear I did not. You sought to help Potter. To help him escape me. I swear I did not. I believed a different wand would work. Explain then what happened. Lucius's wand is destroyed. I cannot understand. The connection exists only between your two wands. Eyes. Please. I beg you. And Harry saw the white hand raise its wand and felt one more surge of vicious anger. Saw the frail old man on the floor writhe in agony. Harry? It was over as quickly as it had come. Harry stood shaking in the darkness, clutching the gate into the garden, his heart racing, his scars still tingling. It was several moments before he realized that Ron and Hermione were at his side. Harry, come back into the house, Hermione whispered. We weren't still thinking of leaving. Yeah, you've got to stay, mate, said Ron, thumping Harry on the back. I tried. Are you alright? Hermione asked, close enough to now look into Harry's face. You look awful. Well, said Harry shakily, probably look better than a panther. When he had finished telling them what he had seen, Ron looked appalled, but Hermione looked downright terrified. But this wasn't. But it was supposed to have stopped. Your scar. It wasn't supposed to do this anymore. You mustn't let that connection open up again. Dumbledore wanted you to close your mind. When he didn't reply, she gripped his arm. Harry! He's taking over the ministry, the newspapers, and half the wizarding world! Don't let him inside your head, too! And that is the end of this lengthy chapter. Thank you for sticking through me till the end. Join me next week for Chapter 6, The Ghoul in Pajamas. Until then, bye!